Sarah Mitchell had always dreamed of flying. At 26, she finally became a commercial pilot for Atlantic Airways, one of the biggest airlines in the country. Her first day at the massive hangar felt like stepping into a dream. The smell of jet fuel mixed with metal and oil filled her nostrils as she walked past rows of gleaming aircraft. "Welcome to the real world." "Rookie," said Captain Tom Bradley, a veteran pilot with 20 years of experience. His weathered face showed years of flying, but his eyes held something Sarah couldn't quite understand, a mixture of tiredness and worry. Sarah was assigned to fly smaller regional routes first. Her aircraft was a mid-sized passenger plane that seated 150 people. She spent hours studying every button, every gauge, every system. Flying had always been her passion, but now it was her responsibility. 150 lives would depend on her skills every time she took off. During her third week, while doing her pre-flight inspection, Sarah noticed something odd. There was a small crack near the engine housing that wasn't mentioned in the maintenance log. She ran her fingers along the metal, feeling the rough edge of what looked like metal fatigue. "Hey, Jim," she called to the head mechanic, pointing to the crack. "This wasn't here yesterday, was it?" Jim walked over, barely glancing at the area. "Oh, that's nothing. Just normal wear and tear. These planes are built tough. A little crack like that won't hurt anything." But Sarah had studied aircraft engineering in college. She knew that even small cracks could become big problems at 30,000 feet. The pressure difference between the cabin and the outside air could turn a tiny crack into a catastrophic failure. "Shouldn't we report this? Get it checked properly?" she asked. Jim shrugged. "Look, Sarah, you're new here. We've been maintaining these birds for decades. Trust me, if it was dangerous, we'd fix it. The company doesn't want to ground planes unless absolutely necessary. Do you know how much money we lose every hour a plane sits on the ground?" That evening, Sarah went home to her small apartment feeling uneasy. She pulled out her laptop and started researching metal fatigue in aircraft. What she found made her stomach turn. There were dozens of cases where small cracks had led to major accidents. People had died because warning signs were ignored. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, she decided to do her own thorough inspection of the aircraft. What she found made her blood run cold. The crack had grown overnight. It was now nearly 3 inches long, running along a critical stress point. But that wasn't the worst part. As she examined the plane more carefully, she found 2 more cracks on the other side. These planes were flying death traps. Nobody seemed to care. Sarah took photos with her phone, documenting everything she found. She knew she had to do something, but she also knew that speaking up could cost her the job she'd worked so hard to get. Airlines didn't like pilots who caused trouble. As she stood in the shadow of the massive aircraft, Sarah realized she was facing the biggest decision of her life. She could stay quiet and hope nothing bad happened, or she could risk everything to keep innocent passengers safe. The weight of that choice felt heavier than the aircraft towering above her. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw images of plane crashes and thought about the families who would never see their loved ones again. By morning, she had made her decision. She would investigate further before taking any action. She arrived at work early before most of the maintenance crew. Using her pilot access card, she entered the hangar and began examining other aircraft in the fleet. What she discovered made her hand shake. Nearly every plane she checked had similar cracks. Some were small, barely visible, but others were large enough to fit her finger into. The metal around the engine mounts showed clear signs of stress fractures. Wings had tiny splits along the edges. It was as if the entire fleet was slowly falling apart. "You're here early," a voice said behind her. Sarah spun around to find Marcus Webb, another pilot who had started just a few months before her. He was carrying a flashlight and looked as concerned as she felt. "Marcus, you scared me. What are you doing here?" "Same thing as you, I think. I've been noticing things that don't seem right. Yesterday, during my flight to Denver, I heard a strange noise from the left engine. When I reported it, they told me it was probably just wind noise and sent the plane back out. This afternoon." Sarah showed Marcus the photos she had taken. His face grew pale as he scrolled through the images on her phone. "This is bad, Sarah, really bad. How long do you think these cracks have been growing? I don't know, but I think someone does know and they're hiding it. I want to check the maintenance records. The maintenance office was supposed to be locked. But Marcus had noticed that the cleaning crew often left it open while they worked. They waited until the janitor was emptying trash cans in another part of the hangar, then slipped inside. The office was filled with filing cabinets and computer terminals. Sarah sat at one of the computers while Marcus kept watch at the door. She accessed the maintenance database using her pilot credentials and began searching for repair records on the planes she had inspected. What she found was shocking. Many of the cracks she had documented were actually listed in the system. There were reports going back months, some even noting that the damage was potentially dangerous and requires immediate attention. But instead of being repaired, the reports had been marked as deferred or monitoring required. Marcus, look at this, Sarah whispered, pointing to the screen. They know about these problems. They've known for months, but they're not fixing them. Marcus read over her shoulder, his face growing more worried with each entry. There's a pattern here. Look at the dates. Every time a mechanic reports a serious problem, it gets reviewed by management and then downgraded to a minor issue. Sarah printed out several pages of reports, stuffing them into her flight bag. Just as they were about to leave, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Marcus quickly shut down the computer while Sarah grabbed the last of the papers. Someone's coming, Marcus whispered. They slipped out the back door of the office just as they heard voices approaching. Back in the hangar, Sarah felt like her world was spinning. She wasn't just dealing with a few maintenance problems. This was a systematic cover-up. The airline was knowingly flying unsafe aircraft to save money on repairs. We have to report this, she told Marcus. People are going to die. Report it to who? The FAA? The company management? Sarah, if we're right about this, then management is already involved. They're the ones approving these deferred repairs. That afternoon, Sarah was scheduled to fly to Chicago with 134 passengers. As she performed her walk-around inspection, she found 2 new cracks that hadn't been there the day before. The plane was literally falling apart, but according to the paperwork, it was cleared for flight. She stood at the boarding gate, watching families with children and elderly couples preparing to trust her with their lives. A young mother was helping her toddler look out the window at the airplane, pointing excitedly at the big wings. Sarah's radio crackled. Flight 447, you're cleared for boarding. Let's get this bird in the air. She looked at the aircraft, then at the passengers, then at the maintenance reports hidden in her bag. In a few hours, she would be responsible for getting all these people safely to Chicago in a plane that might not make it. There, the weight of that responsibility was crushing, but Sarah knew she had already passed the point of no return. She had to act, even if it meant destroying her career. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of taking the unsafe aircraft to Chicago, she walked to the operations desk and spoke directly to the flight coordinator. I'm grounding flight 447. The aircraft has multiple structural issues that make it unsafe for passenger service. The coordinator, a middle-aged man named Dave, looked at her like she had lost her mind. What are you talking about, Mitchell? That plane passed all its inspections this morning. No, it didn't. There are cracks in the engine housing, wing stress points, and metal fatigue throughout the airframe. I have documentation proving these issues have been ignored for months. Dave's expression changed from confusion to anger. You don't have the authority to ground aircraft. That's a maintenance decision, not a pilot decision. Actually, as pilot in command, I have the right and responsibility to refuse any aircraft I believe is unsafe. I won't fly passengers in a plane that might fall apart. Within 15 minutes, Sarah was sitting in the office of Richard Hamilton, the regional operations manager. Hamilton was a tall, thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he had never been inside an actual airplane. Miss Mitchell, do you understand what you've done? You've just cost this company $50,000 in passenger rebookings, crew overtime, and schedule disruptions. I hope you have a very good explanation. Sarah spread the printed maintenance reports across his desk. These documents show that this fleet has been flying with known structural defects for months. Someone in management has been approving flights they knew were dangerous. Hamilton barely glanced at the papers. These are routine maintenance items. Every aircraft has minor issues that are monitored and addressed during scheduled maintenance. You're misunderstanding normal procedures. Normal procedures don't include flying planes with 3-inch cracks and critical stress points. Mr. Hamilton, people are going to die if we keep flying these aircraft. That's quite enough. Hamilton's voice was cold. You're a new pilot with limited experience. You don't understand how airline maintenance works. These aircraft are perfectly safe, and your actions today were completely inappropriate. Sarah felt her temper rising. I understand aircraft engineering better than you think. I also understand that this company is putting profits ahead of passenger safety. I think this meeting is over. Report to Captain Bradley for immediate retraining on company procedures. And Miss Mitchell, if you ever ground another aircraft without proper authorization, you'll be looking for a new job. Sarah left Hamilton's office feeling frustrated and angry but not defeated. If the company wouldn't listen to her concerns, she would find someone who would. That evening, she called her college roommate, Jennifer, who now worked as an investigative journalist for a major newspaper. Sarah explained everything she had discovered, sending copies of the maintenance reports by secure email. Sarah, this is huge. If what you're saying is true, this could be the biggest aviation safety scandal in years. But I need more than just maintenance records. I need proof that management knew about the dangers and chose to ignore them. What kind of proof? Emails, memos, meeting minutes, anything that shows decision makers were aware of the risks. And I'll need someone willing to go on the record. Are you prepared to do that? Sarah thought about her dream job, the career she had worked so hard to build. Speaking publicly would almost certainly end her time as a commercial pilot. Airlines didn't hire pilots who exposed company secrets. I need some time to think about it, she told Jennifer. The next day at work, Sarah noticed that people were treating her differently. Other pilots avoided making eye contact. Mechanics who had been friendly before now ignored her completely. Word had clearly spread about her confrontation with management. Marcus found her in the crew lounge during her break. I heard about what happened yesterday. People are saying you're causing trouble. I'm trying to save lives, Marcus. Someone has to speak up. I know, and I respect that. But Sarah, you need to know something. I've been asking around, and this problem goes deeper than we thought. I talked to a retired mechanic who used to work here. He told me this fleet was purchased used from another airline that went bankrupt. Apparently, these planes had maintenance issues even before Atlantic Airways bought them. Sarah felt sick. So they knew the planes were problematic when they bought them? That's what it sounds like. The company got a great deal because nobody else wanted aircraft with so many problems. They figured they could manage the maintenance issues and still make a profit. That afternoon, Sarah was assigned to fly a different route, but the aircraft was from the same problematic fleet. During her inspection, she found even more cracks than before. The planes were deteriorating faster than they could be repaired. As she stood in the cockpit, running through her pre-flight checklist, Sarah realized she was at a crossroads. She could keep flying and hope nothing bad happened, or she could risk everything to expose the truth. Looking out at the passengers boarding her flight, business people, families, students, Sarah knew she couldn't stay silent. These people trusted her to get them home safely. She couldn't betray that trust by flying an aircraft she knew was dangerous. She picked up her phone and called Jennifer. I'm ready to go on the record. Let's bring this whole thing into the light. Jennifer worked fast. Within a week, she had interviewed 3 retired mechanics, 2 former pilots, and an inside source in the FAA who confirmed that Atlantic Airways had been receiving violation notices for months. The story was scheduled to run in Sunday's paper with the headline, Flying Death Traps, Major Airline Covers Up Safety Defects. Sarah knew her life was about to change forever. She spent Saturday night walking around her neighborhood, looking at ordinary families in their homes, thinking about all the people who flew every day without knowing the risks they were taking. Sunday morning, her phone started ringing at 6 a.m. The newspaper story had broken online at midnight. And by morning, it was the lead story on every major news website. Sarah's name was mentioned as the whistleblower pilot who had first raised concerns about the fleet, The first call was from Captain Bradley. "Sarah, what have you done? My phone hasn't stopped ringing. The media wants to interview you. The FAA is launching an investigation. Hamilton is furious. Tom, you've been flying these planes too. Haven't you noticed the problems?" There was a long silence. Finally, Bradley said, "I've seen things. Heard noises that didn't sound right. But Sarah, I've got 2 kids in college and a mortgage. I can't afford to lose this job, and I can't afford to let people die." The second call was from Hamilton. "Mitchell, you're fired. Clear out your locker and turn in your badge. And don't expect any airline in this country to hire you after this." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and terror. She was unemployed, probably unemployable in her chosen career. But at least she could sleep at night knowing she had done the right thing. By noon, news vans were parked outside her apartment building. Reporters were calling her phone constantly, wanting interviews. The story was spreading across social media. Hashtags like Save Lives and Airline Cover uptrending worldwide. Marcus called that afternoon. "Sarah, they've grounded the entire fleet. Every single plane is being inspected by independent mechanics. You did it. You actually stopped them." But Sarah's victory felt bittersweet. That evening, she watched the news coverage of passengers stranded at airports across the country as Atlantic Airways canceled hundreds of flights. The airline's stock price had dropped 40% in one day, while passengers are inconvenienced. The news anchor was saying, "Aviation experts say that pilot Sarah Mitchell's actions may have prevented a major catastrophe." The structural defects found in Atlantic Airways' fleet were severe enough that multiple aircraft could have suffered catastrophic failures during flight. The next morning, Sarah received a call that surprised her. It was from Senator Margaret Chen, who chaired the Senate Aviation Safety Committee. "Miss Mitchell, I want to personally thank you for your courage. The committee is launching a full investigation into Atlantic Airways and the FAA's oversight procedures. We'd like you to testify before Congress about what you discovered." "Senator, I'm not sure what I can add to what's already been reported. You can put a human face on this story. You can explain to the American people why one pilot risked her career to keep them safe. And you can help us make sure this never happens again." Sarah agreed to testify, knowing it would make her even more famous and probably even less employable in the aviation industry. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, Sarah received hundreds of emails and letters from people thanking her. Passengers who had flown on Atlantic Airways aircraft wrote to say they were grateful someone had spoken up. Pilots from other airlines sent private messages of support, though few were willing to be quoted publicly. But she also received hate mail from Atlantic Airways employees who had lost their jobs when the company went bankrupt. The airline couldn't survive the scandal and the massive costs of fleet replacement. 3,000 people were unemployed because of her actions. One letter particularly stung. It was from a mechanic named Robert, who had worked for Atlantic Airways for 15 years. "Miss Mitchell, I know you think you're a hero, but you've destroyed my career and my family's future. Yes, there were maintenance issues, but we were managing them. No plane ever crashed. No one ever died. You ruined thousands of lives to prevent an accident that might never have happened." Sarah read the letter 3 times. Feeling the weight of all the consequences her actions had caused, she had prevented potential deaths, but she had also destroyed livelihoods. The line between heroism and destruction was thinner than she had ever imagined as she prepared for her congressional testimony. Sarah realized that doing the right thing wasn't as simple as she had thought. Every choice had consequences. And sometimes those consequences hurt innocent people. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she would think about that young mother and her toddler at the boarding gate. And she knew she had made the only choice she could live with. The Senate hearing room was packed with reporters, aviation experts, and family members of people who had flown on Atlantic Airways. Sarah sat at a long table, facing a panel of senators, with cameras recording every word she spoke. Senator Chen began the questioning. "Miss Mitchell, please tell the committee what you discovered about the Atlantic Airways fleet and why you felt compelled to risk your career to expose these problems." Sarah took a deep breath and began her testimony. She explained the cracks, the deferred maintenance, the management cover-up, She showed photographs and read from maintenance reports. As she spoke, she could see the shock on the senators' faces. In your professional opinion, Senator Chen asked, what would have happened if these aircraft had continued flying? Senator, it wasn't a matter of if there would be an accident, but when. Metal fatigue doesn't get better with time. Those cracks were growing larger with every flight cycle. Eventually, the structural integrity would have failed catastrophically. Senator Robert Hayes, who represented the state where Atlantic Airways was headquartered, was less sympathetic. Miss Mitchell, your actions cost 3,000 people their jobs and passengers millions of dollars in canceled flights and rebookings. Don't you think you could have handled this situation more quietly, through internal channels? I tried internal channels first, Senator. Management was aware of the problems and chose to ignore them. When the safety of passengers is at stake, there is no quiet solution. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Sarah answered every question thoroughly, even when senators tried to paint her as a troublemaker who had overreacted to minor maintenance issues. During a break, Jennifer found Sarah in a small conference room. You're doing great in there. The public is completely behind you. Social media is calling you a hero. I don't feel like a hero. Jen, I feel like someone who destroyed a lot of lives, Sarah. 3 independent investigations have now confirmed that your concerns were valid. The National Transportation Safety Board released a report yesterday saying that at least 5 of those aircraft were within weeks of catastrophic failure. You didn't destroy lives, you saved them, but the personal cost kept mounting. Sarah's savings were running out, and despite her newfound fame, no airline would hire her. Aviation industry executives saw her as a liability. Someone who might expose their problems too. She tried applying for jobs at smaller companies, cargo airlines, charter services, even flight instruction, but her reputation preceded her everywhere. The aviation world was smaller than people realized, and word traveled fast. 6 months after the hearing, Sarah was working at a coffee shop near the airport, serving drinks to pilots and passengers. It was humiliating, but she needed the money. Every day she watched planes take off and land through the shop's windows, feeling like an exile from the world she loved. One morning, Marcus came in wearing a new pilot's uniform from a different airline. He had found a job with a smaller company that operated newer aircraft. Sarah, I owe you an apology. When all this started, I was scared. I should have stood with you from the beginning. You had bills to pay, Marcus. I understand. No, you don't understand. I found out something that makes what you did even more important. He sat down across from her, speaking quietly. I have a friend who works for the insurance company that covered Atlantic Airways. He told me they found evidence that the company knew about these problems when they bought the fleet. They got the planes cheap because of the known defects, then decided to run them until they literally fell apart. Sarah felt sick. They were essentially gambling with people's lives to save money. Exactly. And it gets worse. The insurance investigation found internal emails where executives calculated how much they would save in maintenance costs versus how much they might have to pay in. Wrongful death lawsuits. If a plane crashed, they decided the lawsuits would be cheaper. That evening, Sarah called Jennifer with the new information. Within days, another story broke. This one focusing on Atlantic Airways executives and their calculated decision to risk passenger safety for profit. The story sparked congressional hearings on airline accountability and led to new federal regulations requiring more frequent inspections of aging aircraft. Several Atlantic Airways executives were charged with criminal negligence. But for Sarah, vindication came too late to save her aviation career. She had been out of the cockpit too long. Her association with the scandal made her unemployable in commercial aviation. 1 year after the story broke, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. It was from Dr. Elizabeth Warren, director of the National Aviation Safety Foundation. Miss Mitchell, we're starting a new program to investigate aviation safety issues before they become major problems. We need someone with your integrity and technical knowledge to lead our field investigation team. The job doesn't involve flying, but it would put you back in the aviation safety world. Sarah accepted the position immediately. It wasn't flying. It was meaningful work that could prevent other safety disasters. On her first day at the new job, Sarah received a package with no return address. Inside was a letter from a pilot at a major airline. Miss Mitchell, I want you to know that your courage has made flying safer for everyone. Because of what you exposed, airlines are now much more careful about maintenance issues. Pilots feel more empowered to report safety concerns. You may have lost your flying career, but you've saved countless lives. Thank you. Sarah folded the letter carefully and put it in her desk drawer. The price of truth had been higher than she ever imagined, but she finally felt at peace with the choice she had made. 5 years after the Atlantic Airways scandal, Sarah had built a new life for herself. As Director of Field Investigations for the National Aviation Safety Foundation, she traveled the country examining aircraft and investigating safety concerns before they became tragedies. Her work had already prevented 2 major accidents. In one case, she discovered a manufacturing defect in engine components that could have led to multiple crashes. In another, she exposed a maintenance company that was falsifying inspection records. Sarah's reputation had transformed. While she was still blacklisted from commercial flying, she had become one of the most respected aviation safety experts in the world. Universities invited her to speak. Government agencies consulted her on new regulations. Her sacrifice had given her a different kind of influence. Perhaps more important than any she could have had as just another airline pilot. But the personal costs lingered. She lived alone in a small apartment, having lost most of her old friendships when the scandal broke. Dating was difficult. Men either saw her as a celebrity or were intimidated by her reputation for uncompromising honesty. One morning, Sarah received a call that brought everything full circle. It was from Captain Bradley, her old supervisor at Atlantic Airways. Sarah, I know we didn't part on good terms, but I wanted you to know something. I'm retiring next month, and I've been thinking a lot about what you did. I was wrong to pressure you to stay quiet. You saved lives, including mine. What do you mean, Tom? I was scheduled to fly one of those problem aircraft the day after you grounded the fleet. The plane I would have flown suffered a complete engine failure during the inspection. The mechanics said it would have happened about 2 hours into the flight right over the Rocky Mountains. There would have been no way to land safely. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Tom, I never knew. The passenger manifest had 147 people on it, including a school group returning from a field trip. 42 children, Sarah. You didn't just save abstract lives. You saved specific people, including kids who are now finishing high school because you had the courage to speak up. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her office looking at a wall covered with aviation safety, awards and letters of thanks from passengers and crew members. The recognition felt good, but it was Tom's call that finally gave her peace. That evening, Sarah spoke at a conference for young aviation professionals. After her presentation about the importance of safety over profit, a young woman approached her. Miss Mitchell, I'm Lisa Chen. I'm finishing flight school next month. I wanted you to know that your story is the reason I decided to become a pilot. You showed me that this profession is about more than just flying. It's about protecting the people who trust us with their lives. What airline are you going to work for? Sarah asked. I've been offered positions at several companies, but I'm choosing Pacific Airways. They've completely restructured their safety department since your story broke. They actually use your case as part of their training program, teaching new pilots that they have the right and responsibility to ground unsafe aircraft. Sarah smiled. That's exactly what should happen. The industry learned from what happened at Atlantic Airways. Miss Mitchell, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret what you did? Do you miss flying? Sarah thought for a long moment. I miss flying every single day. When I see planes taking off, I still feel that pull, that desire to be up there in the cockpit. But regret? No. I sleep well at night knowing that I chose human lives over my own career ambitions. Later that week, Sarah received news that brought her story full circle. The Federal Aviation Administration announced new regulations requiring all commercial aircraft to undergo enhanced structural inspections every 6 months. The regulations were officially called the Sarah Mitchell Safety Standards. The Mitchell Standards represent a fundamental shift in how we approach aviation maintenance, said FAA Administrator James Rodriguez. at the announcement ceremony. These rules will prevent the kind of systematic safety failures that nearly led to tragedy 5 years ago. Sarah was invited to the ceremony but chose not to attend. She had never sought publicity or recognition. Her goal had always been simply to keep people safe. A month later, Sarah was at the airport on business when she witnessed something that made her realize how much the industry had changed. A young pilot was doing his walk-around inspection when he noticed a small hydraulic leak. Instead of accepting a mechanic's assurance that it was minor, the pilot insisted on a full system check. "I'm not taking this bird up until I know it's completely safe," the pilot told his supervisor. "I have 178 passengers counting on me." The supervisor didn't argue. The hydraulic system was thoroughly inspected, and a potentially dangerous leak was discovered and repaired before flight. As Sarah watched the scene, she realized that this was her true legacy. Not the awards or recognition, but the cultural change in aviation safety. Pilots now felt empowered to put safety first. Management took maintenance concerns seriously. The traveling public was safer because one person had been willing to sacrifice everything for the truth. That night, Sarah stood on her apartment balcony, watching planes land at the distant airport. Their lights looked like moving stars against the dark sky. She thought about all the passengers on those flights, people going home to their families, starting new adventures, living their lives safely because the aviation industry had learned to prioritize their welfare over profit. Sarah had given up her dream of flying, but she had gained something more valuable: the knowledge that her sacrifice had meaning. Every safe landing was a small victory. Every family that made it home intact was a reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do is risk everything for what you know is right. The truth had cost her everything she thought she wanted, but it had given her something better: a life of purpose and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that courage, no matter how much it costs, is always worth the price.